And welcome back, everyone, to Live Now from Fox. We continue our coverage of former FBI Director James Comey indicted on 2 counts. There was a lot of rumblings this week that it might come down before Tuesday, and we'll get into why it needed to be right before Tuesday here for this indictment of the grand jury. Again, you are watching Live Now from Fox, so we've got you covered here with this major breaking news that is happening this evening. President Trump already sounding off, like you could imagine, on his Truth Social, saying justice in America, one of the worst human beings this country has ever been exposed to, is James Comey, the former corrupt head of the FBI. Today, he was indicted by a grand jury on 2 felony counts for various illegal and unlawful acts. He has been so bad for our country for so long and is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation. Make America great again. So that is something very typical that you would expect there from President Trump to put that out just moments ago on his Truth Social. But right now, we want to have coverage here continuing for you. Let's bring in our 2 guests to help break it all down for us right now. Kaylin Deese joins me with the Washington Examiner, as well as Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor. Great to have you 2 on. And Kaylin, if you first just go with you, set it up for us. And I mean, like I said, the rumblings were already happening earlier this week that this could come down.
2020 testimony with Comey going before the Senate Judiciary Committee, whenever he was asked essentially whether he had allowed or directed anyone else to bring any sort of leaks over to the media, and he denied ever doing that as such, even though he was grilled multiple times. There was a famous clip with Senator Ted Cruz, where he's asked about this and asked about his whether his statement aligns with what McCabe had also said in the past. So I think that it's very interesting that we're looking at a very specific time and space whenever this discussion went down and where the alleged false statements and obstruction took place. And it's very surprising, I think, to a lot of people, because there was that notion over the weekend that Trump was urging his Justice Department publicly that this needed to happen, and the statute of limitations was running up on September 30th. And I think that toward the bare end, some people were thinking maybe this isn't actually going to happen, but it did. And we're looking at a new prosecutor in this office, and it's going to be very interesting to watch as this takes place going forward.
Yeah, no doubt. And Nima, I want to get to you now. I want you to continue to talk a little bit more about this statute of limitations that were coming up on Tuesday, and talk about how the grand jury, they were able to get it done fast. But really, at the end of the day, I mean, what's the old saying that grand jury can indict a ham sandwich?
Apparently, yes. And Mike, really today is a dark day for the Department of Justice. The former interim U.S. Attorney Erik Siebert resigned because he didn't believe there was enough probable cause to even get an indictment, much less reasonable doubt to convict former FBI Director Jim Comey. But of course, the president found someone, Lindsay Halligan, who was willing to actually indict this case. And we know that grand jurors will really indict the proverbial ham sandwich. So for folks that don't know, the important thing is this. The 5-year statute of limitations was coming up on Tuesday, September 30th. This testimony happened on September 30th, 2020. So they're really up against the clock here. And when you go to the grand jury, what you do is it's a secret proceeding. There's usually 23 grand jurors, and just a slight majority of them, 12 out of the 23, have to return a true bill or an indictment. At that proceeding, there's no defense attorney present. It's just the prosecution, usually 1 or 2 witnesses, and they're presenting a one-sided account of the case. So I put more than 1,000 people in federal prison. I never once failed to get a grand jury indictment. But that doesn't mean that this is a strong case or a righteous case at all. In fact, it is not. And now you have the president of the United States prosecuting his political opponents for something that, frankly, if he cared about this leak and that this was so important, this should have been prosecuted during the first Trump administration. This all happened in 2017. This is like going after Al Capone for tax evasion. You're not going after him for the leak, but because he talked about the leak and maybe lied about it years later, you're trying to charge the former director of the FBI. Really shameful behavior by Halligan in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I think her first case, she's never prosecuted one, is likely going to be a loser.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit more about that shaky ground. The DOJ and FBI were having issues even trying to put a charge against James Comey, and they just put this Virginia U.S. attorney in. What do we know about her?
Well, we know that she has a background in, having basically no prosecutorial experience. She has been a former aide to the president. And, up until recently, she was, working in the White House, and she really led the charge more recently on some of the calls to action to change some of the information that was being relayed about certain subjects like slavery in the Smithsonian Museum to try to convey a more positive message to the American people about the nation's history, which drew criticism from, many areas in the online world. But, to be more precise about her background, she doesn't, again, have really any sort of experience working in a U.S. attorney's office. She's relying on line prosecutors to help her out with this. And I think it is worth noting that because we know that this grand jury has been impaneled for a while, I do think that, a lot of this really does come down to, this case being open for much longer than she's been in the inside this office now. And I think that, one thing that's interesting about Erik Siebert, a lot of people don't know, is that, he has a father-in-law, and this father-in-law, Mr. Richard Cullen, is actually, Washington Post reported this 8 years ago. He is sort of the godfather to one of Comey's children. And that really sort of raised some alarms about whether, Siebert was really going to be up to the task. Also, the fact that he didn't seem to want to go forward on the Letitia James case. Now we have somebody like Halligan who is inside this office, and she seems like she's ready to do anything that the main justice would like to see done with Mr. Comey here.
And Nima, it seems like James Comey's defense attorneys will almost be licking their chops here at really the timeline of how we get here to the two indictments. Just tell me how it is going to proceed now.
Well, the president's own words are going to be used against him because now we have a ready-made defense for selective or political prosecution. So if Comey is being targeted because he is not a friend of the president, because of his political affiliation, because of some of the things that he's posted on Twitter, like the 86-47. Well, that's a Fifth Amendment defense. That's a First Amendment defense. So that's due process and freedom of speech, freedom of affiliation. So I can see a judge in this case, whoever gets assigned this case, to take a very hard look at this. Look, false statement cases are not easy to prosecute. You have to prove that the false statement was intentional and it was material. So it's a pretty high burden. So the fact that we bring a very questionable case with a ready-made defense in terms of the materiality and the intent, and now you have the constitutional defenses, I think this is likely going to be a loser and will really look on this day, again, as a dark day for the Department of Justice. DOJ prosecutors have stood up to presidents before, Richard Nixon, even Donald Trump during his first administration and the Stop the Steal. He wanted DOJ lawyers to do his bidding. They said no, they were going to resign en masse. Now, one of them did, and now there's a loyalist, Halligan, who is apparently willing to do anything the president wants. So hopefully, again, district judges, appellate judges will step in. They'll stop this injustice because really that's what it is.
And Kaylin, it seems like, President Trump so many times has really rallied against political prosecutions. I mean, look at what the president has gone through. Now it seems like it is just going this way towards James Comey in the same fashion that it was for President Trump.
Yeah, I think that the president is going to have to be on the lookout for people, some of his critics, foes. Already, they've been making comments, especially as there's been his weaponization task force that's been looking into, people like Letitia James or people like Adam Schiff over alleged mortgage fraud violations in cases that also could come down the pike here soon. It's really going to be something that he has to sort of stick to his guns about. I mean, although he says that he was under a weaponized system under the Biden administration with Merrick Garland, people are going to be levying the same types of allegations against him. But from a political standpoint, it's going to be incumbent on him to sort of show, and I have doubts that he's going to be able to do this in a compelling way, that what happened against him was blatant weaponization. What he's doing now is bringing some sort of justice that's been a long time coming against people who have, because of their positions of power, haven't been held to the same standard that normal people, normal citizens would have. That's sort of the argument or the case that he's going to have to make to the American people. And I think that it's going to matter, again, as Nima is saying here, if it's a loser case, and again, they're going to be leaning on, claims that maybe Northern Virginia is has a more democratic predisposition for the jury pool. But if it's a loser case, it's going to look like that Trump just brought this, or the DOJ just brought this, just to sort of appease what he wanted. And so it's got to be something, I think, from their end that they're successful on, or else it could, face a blowback in the public eye.
And Nima, lastly, I mean, going just days before this would run out for them, why wait until the last couple of days and maybe try to do it more in the summertime when you at least had a little bit more time, where it doesn't look like you're right up against the clock and you need to get this grand jury together to get this indictment going?
Well, Mike, I think the issue was no career prosecutor was going to take on this case. No one that cared about their reputation or justice or the rule of law. When you take that oath, when you join the Department of Justice, your job is to serve the public. You represent the United States of America. You don't represent the Attorney General or even the president. You're supposed to do what's right, and you're supposed to do what's just. And listen, I get it. I understand that the president is upset with how he was treated in some of the criminal and civil cases. But Jim Comey really didn't have a whole lot to do with that. He obviously, oversaw the Russia investigation, but I'm sure Hillary Clinton believes that he was responsible in large part for President Trump getting elected because of some of the statements that he made shortly before the election. So to go after folks like Adam Schiff, who was doing his job leading the impeachment, or even Letitia James, who handled the civil case, you're trying to put people in jail. I mean, that's really what separates the United States of America from third world countries. Prosecuting your political opponents merely because of their political beliefs really isn't right. And that's what we're seeing here at the 11th hour. I think a judge, I think a jury, and I think American people will see right through this and see that this is not justice at all, but this is political retribution and wrong.
Nima, does it even go to trial? And if it does, and just say he was convicted, I mean, what's he looking at as far as years in prison?
Potentially 5 years for the false statement, 5 years on the obstruction. I don't think it makes it to trial. I think it will be dismissed. And even if it doesn't, Kaylin talked about it. Northern Virginia, that's pretty liberal. You're not going to get 12 out of 12 jurors to convict on a case like this. I'm surprised they even got 12 out of 23 grand jurors. I mean, this is the type of case that would have been a no bill and should have been a no, not indictment.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it just shakes out there. But thank you both for being with us here on the breaking news here of the day. Kaylin Dees, Nima Rahmani, great to have you on and share your input and analysis. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks.
Take care. All right, everyone. And we will continue to track this major story for you right here on Live Now from Fox. We'll be back in 2 with much more.